The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Preston Music Hall, casting long rectangles of light across the polished wooden floor. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled through the maple trees lining the walkway to the entrance. Inside, the air hummed with nervous energy as dozens of well-dressed pianists prepared for the day's auditions. Ana Lopez clutched her worn leather handbag close to her chest as she hesitated at the grand entrance doors. At 42, she was easily 20 years older than most of the other competitors milling about in the spacious lobby. She took a deep breath, brushed a strand of graying hair behind her ear, and pushed through the heavy door. The sudden rush of cool, air-conditioned air hit her face as she stepped inside. The lobby buzzed with activity. Young musicians in pressed suits and elegant dresses chatted animatedly, some nervously flipping through sheet music, while others mimicked complex finger movements on invisible keyboards. A few were accompanied by their personal instructors who whispered last-minute advice. Anna's plain cotton dress and scuffed shoes stood in stark contrast to the polished appearance of everyone else. Her hands, rough and calloused from years of scrubbing floors and washing dishes, fidgeted with the strap of her handbag. She had spent nearly an hour that morning trying to scrub the stubborn stains from beneath her fingernails, evidence of the cleaning job she'd finished just before dawn. At the registration desk, a young man with neatly combed hair and wire-rimmed glasses looked up with a practiced smile that quickly faltered when he saw Anna. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting he doubted she was in the right place. "I'm here for the piano auditions," Anna replied softly, her slight accent causing her to pronounce each word with careful precision. The young man blinked twice. "The competitor registration?" Anna nodded. "Yes, please. I sent my application by mail 3 weeks ago." He shuffled through a stack of papers, his expression making it clear he thought there must be some mistake. Finding her name, his eyebrows rose slightly. "Ana Lopez? You're auditioning today?" "Yes," she said simply. "Is there a problem?" No problem at all," he replied quickly, though his tone suggested otherwise. He handed her a number, 37, and directed her to the waiting area. "The judges are running about 20 minutes behind schedule. Make yourself comfortable." As Anna walked away, she could feel his eyes following her, could almost hear the questions forming in his mind. She was used to it by now. The sideways glances, the puzzled expressions, the assumptions. The waiting area was a large room with rows of chairs, most already occupied by competitors warming up their fingers or reviewing music. Anna found an empty seat in the back corner and settled in, placing her handbag on her lap. She pulled out a folded and somewhat dog-eared copy of the sheet music she would be playing. The pages were worn at the edges, marked with penciled notes and reminders she'd added over the years. A few seats away, a group of young pianists were discussing their selections for the day's audition. "I'm doing Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody," said a young woman with perfectly straightened blonde hair. Her accent spoke of private schools and European holidays. "My teacher says it's ambitious, but the judges will remember it." "Rachmaninoff for me," replied a young man with an expensive watch glinting on his wrist. "Prelude in G minor. Been working on it since January." They continued comparing repertoires, each selection more impressive than the last. Occasionally, one would casually drop the name of a famous mentor or a prestigious competition they'd placed in previously. Anna kept her eyes on her sheet music, but she couldn't help overhearing their conversation. When it turned to the competition itself, her ears perked up. "I heard they're only accepting 8 finalists this year," the blonde woman said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Last year it was 12. "Well, that makes sense," another replied. "The quality has gone down recently. Remember that guy last year who tried to play Chopin's Nocturne and completely fell apart halfway through? So embarrassing." They laughed, the sound tinkling like expensive crystal. "Speaking of which," the young man with the watch said, lowering his voice slightly but not enough, "did you see that older woman who just walked in? The one in the back corner." Several heads turned subtly in Anna's direction. She pretended not to notice, keeping her eyes fixed on her music. "What do you think her story is?" he continued. "Lost bet? Midlife crisis. Maybe she's somebody's mother and got confused about the waiting area," suggested another, prompting a few snickers. The blonde woman glanced over more openly. "Those hands don't look like they've spent much time on piano keys. More like scrubbing toilets." More laughter, less restrained now. Anna turned a page in her music, her face betraying nothing. She'd expected this. In many ways, she'd been preparing for it her whole life. A volunteer entered the waiting room and called number 35. A young man stood, adjusted his tie, and followed her out. The room felt tense now. They were getting closer to the actual performances. The group near Anna had moved on to discussing a famous pianist who had recently given a concert in the city. Anna closed her eyes for a moment, picturing her own small apartment. The upright piano that took up most of her living room. A rescue from a music school that had been upgrading their practice rooms. It wasn't much to look at with its chipped ivory keys and slightly uneven bench, but it was hers. For the past 15 years, it had been her most faithful companion. Every night after her shift ended at the hospital where she worked as a janitor, she would come home, make a cup of tea, and play for at least an hour before bed. No matter how tired her hands were or how late the hour, on her days off she would play for 5, 6, sometimes 8 hours, losing track of time as the music transported her away from her tiny apartment with its leaky faucet and temperamental heating. Number 36, a young woman in a striking red dress, stood, her shoulders back with confidence. She flashed a smile at her friends and strode after the volunteer, leaving a trail of expensive perfume in her wake. Anna would be next. She checked her watch, a plain digital timepiece with a rubber strap. It had been nearly an hour since she arrived. She thought about all the hours that had led to this moment. The years of saving pennies for her first lessons as a child. The early morning practices before school. The scholarship she'd won to the music academy at 16. And the accident that had taken her mother just months later, forcing her to drop out and find work to support her younger siblings. The cleaning jobs, the night shifts. The endless parade of people who looked at her and saw nothing but a pair of hard-working hands. The move to this country 12 years ago. Starting over from nothing. The piano she'd found abandoned on a curb, repaired with YouTube tutorials and sheer determination. The free community college courses she took one at a time, working around her cleaning schedule. The elderly music professor who'd overheard her playing in an empty classroom one evening and had offered her occasional lessons in exchange for cleaning his apartment. And finally, the advertisement for this competition she'd seen posted at the bus stop 3 months ago. The application fee that had cost her a week's groceries. The hours spent practicing in the early morning darkness before her cleaning shift began. Number 37, Anna blinked, suddenly aware that the volunteer was standing in the doorway looking around expectantly. She quickly tucked her sheet music into her bag and stood. "That's me," she said, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. The group of young pianists looked up, some with surprised expressions, others barely concealing smirks. As Anna walked past them, she heard one whisper, "This should be interesting." "Think she knows what a piano looks like?" Another stifled a laugh. "Maybe she's here to dust it." Anna kept walking, her back straight, her chin slightly lifted. The volunteer led her down a hallway lined with photographs of famous musicians who had performed in this very hall over the decades. Their stern, accomplished faces seemed to watch her pass with skepticism. They stopped at a set of double doors. The volunteer turned to Anna with a professional but distant smile. "The judges will ask for your selection when you enter. Take your time setting up at the piano. Good luck." She pushed open one of the doors, gesturing for Anna to enter. The auditorium was larger than Anna had imagined, with rows of empty seats stretching back into shadows. At the front, under bright lights, stood a magnificent grand piano, bigger and more imposing than any she had ever played. Behind a long table sat 5 judges, all with expressions of polite boredom that shifted to mild surprise as they took in Anna's appearance. As she walked toward the piano, Anna could feel their eyes on her. Taking in her simple dress, her worn shoes, her work-roughened hands, she could read their thoughts as clearly as if they had spoken them aloud. Who is this woman? Why is she here? Surely this is some kind of mistake. Anna reached the piano and stood beside it, facing the judges. The head judge, a stern-looking woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, cleared her throat. Your name and selection, please? Anna took a deep breath. This was it. The moment 15 years of secret dreams had been leading to. My name is Ana Lopez, she said, her voice stronger now. I will be playing Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. A ripple of surprise passed across the judges' faces. One of them, a middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed beard, actually chuckled. Another whispered something to his colleague, who nodded with an expression that clearly said, this should be good. From the wings, Anna could see a few of the other competitors who had gathered to watch, their expressions ranging from amusement to second-hand embarrassment. The blonde woman from earlier had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with anticipated disaster. Anna adjusted the bench, sat down, and placed her hands on the cool ivory keys. For a moment, doubt crept in. The piano was different from her worn upright at home. The bench felt strange. The lights were hot on her face. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps this had been a foolish dream after all. Then she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered why she was here. Not for them. Not for their approval or understanding. For the music. For the girl she'd once been. For the chance to finally be seen. She opened her eyes, straightened her back, and began to play. The first notes hung in the air of Preston Music Hall like hesitant whispers. Anna's fingers trembled slightly as they pressed down on the keys. The opening measure was tentative, almost uncertain, exactly as the judges had expected. From behind the judges' table, the head judge, Mrs. Richardson, exchanged a knowing glance with Professor Winters, the bearded man who had chuckled earlier. The woman's tight bun seemed to pull her eyebrows higher as she scribbled something on her notepad. Professor Winters leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, not bothering to take notes yet. Why waste the ink? In the wings, the blonde woman from the waiting room nudged her friend and whispered, "This is painful. Should someone stop her?" A few of the younger competitors had gathered to watch, drawn by curiosity and the promised spectacle of failure. Some were already smirking, phones half raised to potentially capture a moment worth sharing later. The third judge, an older gentleman with thick glasses and a reputation for falling asleep during particularly boring performances, was already stifling a yawn behind his hand. The fourth and fifth judges, a middle-aged woman with fashionable red-framed glasses and a younger man who had once been a child prodigy, wore identical expressions of polite discomfort, the kind reserved for situations where one is trapped witnessing something embarrassing. Anna's second measure was equally uncertain. Her posture was all wrong, hunched slightly forward as if she were still scrubbing floors rather than sitting at a concert grand piano worth more than she earned in 5 years. Her left hand missed a note, creating a barely perceptible dissonance that caused the fifth judge to wince. "Perhaps we should stop her now," Mrs. Richardson whispered to Professor Winters. "Save everyone the discomfort." He nodded slightly but made no move to interrupt. "Let her get through at least a minute. We don't want complaints about unfair treatment." The competitors watching from the wings had grown in number. The girl in the red dress who had performed just before Anna was there, her expression a mixture of relief that she wasn't the worst today, and second-hand embarrassment. Behind her stood a tall young man who had graduated from the city's prestigious music conservatory last year. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyebrows raised in amused disbelief. "Where did she even come from?" the red-dress girl whispered. "Probably saw the competition advertised and thought, why not?" replied the conservatory graduate with a smirk. "Some people don't know what they don't know." Anna was now 10 measures into the piece and something odd was happening. Her shoulders had begun to relax. Her back straightened almost imperceptibly. The initial trembling in her fingers had stopped. The notes, while still not quite right, were becoming clearer, more deliberate. Professor Winters uncrossed his arms and leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from dismissive to curious. The third judge's eyes opened a bit wider behind his thick glasses. By the 20th measure, Anna's hands had found their confidence. Her left hand now moved with surprising dexterity across the lower keys, while her right began to dance with growing assurance. The tentative whispers of before had evolved into a more coherent voice, still quiet, but with unexpected clarity. The red-framed glasses judge tilted her head slightly, her pen paused above her notes. Something was happening that none of them had anticipated. The woman in the simple dress with the rough hands was playing, really playing. As the piece progressed into its more complex middle section, Anna's posture transformed completely. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted, and her shoulders fell back naturally. Her hands now moved with the assured confidence of someone who knew exactly where each finger needed to be at precisely the right moment. The Chopin Ballade, one of the most technically challenging pieces in the piano repertoire, was flowing from her fingers with growing authority. The blonde woman in the wings had stopped whispering. Her friend's phone had lowered, no longer poised to capture a moment of failure. The red dress girl's mouth had fallen slightly open. The conservatory graduate had uncrossed his arms, his expression of amusement replaced by confusion. On Anna's face, a subtle change had occurred. The nervous, uncertain woman who had walked into the auditorium had disappeared. In her place was someone else entirely. Someone lost in the music, connected to it in a way that transcended the physical surroundings. Her eyes were half closed, not in concentration but in something closer to reverence. When she reached the piece's first crescendo, her fingers thundered across the keys with a power that seemed impossible from her small frame. The sound filled every corner of the auditorium, rich and resonant. Mrs. Richardson sat up straighter in her chair. Professor Winters had begun frantically taking notes, his earlier dismissiveness forgotten. The third judge removed his glasses and cleaned them, as if to ensure he was seeing correctly. The fourth and fifth judges exchanged glances of astonishment. The younger judge mouthed a silent wow to his colleague. In the wings, the crowd of watching competitors had grown larger and completely silent. The blonde woman's face had drained of color. The conservatory graduate's confident posture had collapsed into something more uncertain. They were witnessing something none of them had prepared for, the emergence of extraordinary talent from the most unexpected source. As Anna navigated one of the piece's most technically difficult passages, a series of rapid arpeggios that required both precision and power, the auditorium seemed to hold its collective breath. Her fingers flew across the keys with a speed and accuracy that professional pianists would envy. There was not a single missed note, not a moment of hesitation, but it wasn't just technical skill that had captured everyone's attention. It was the emotion pouring from the music. Anna played with a depth of feeling that made the notes more than just sounds. They were stories, confessions, prayers. The piano sang under her touch, its voice by turns pleading, rejoicing, mourning, and celebrating. When the piece reached its most tender moment, a delicate, lyrical passage that required the gentlest touch, tears glistened in the corners of Anna's eyes. She wasn't performing for the judges anymore. She wasn't even in the auditorium. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere only the music could take her. Mrs. Richardson put down her pen. There was no need to take notes anymore. This wasn't a performance that could be evaluated with check marks and numerical scores. This was art in its purest form. Raw, honest, transcendent. Professor Winters had leaned so far forward that he was almost falling out of his chair. The third judge was fully awake now, his earlier drowsiness replaced by rapt attention. The fourth judge had removed her red glasses, as if they were somehow interfering with the experience. The fifth judge sat completely still, afraid that any movement might break the spell that had fallen over the room. In the wings, no one whispered anymore. No one smirked or exchanged knowing glances. They watched and listened, their earlier judgments forgotten. The blonde woman's hand had moved from her friend's arm to her own chest as if to calm a racing heart. The conservatory graduate's face showed a complex mixture of emotions: admiration, confusion, and perhaps a touch of fear. Fear that everything he thought he knew about music, about talent, about who belonged in this world and who didn't, might be wrong. As Anna approached the final section of the ballade, a tour de force that required both technical brilliance and emotional depth, the energy in the room had completely transformed. The skepticism, the mockery, the secondhand embarrassment had vanished, replaced by a collective sense of witnessing something rare and precious. Her hands moved with increasing intensity, building toward the piece's powerful conclusion. The notes came faster, more demanding, more complex, but Anna never faltered. Her connection to the music remained unbroken, her technical command unwavering. In the final measures, as Chopin's masterpiece reached its thunderous conclusion, Anna's entire body seemed to participate in the music. Her shoulders rose and fell with the phrasing. Her head moved slightly with the rhythm. Her face reflected every emotional nuance in the score. She wasn't playing the piano anymore. She had become the music itself. The final chord resonated throughout the hall, powerful and definitive. Anna's hands remained poised above the keys for a moment, as if reluctant to break the connection. Then slowly, like someone waking from a deep dream, she lowered them to her lap. For several seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. The silence was complete, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Then Mrs. Richardson cleared her throat, trying to regain her professional composure. "Thank you, Ms. Lopez," she said, her voice not quite steady. "That was—" She paused, searching for the right word. "That was quite unexpected." Professor Winters nodded, still slightly dazed. "Yes, quite remarkable," he managed. Anna stood slowly from the piano bench, suddenly aware again of her surroundings, of the people watching her. The confidence that had possessed her during the performance began to recede. Her shoulders curved forward slightly. Her eyes lowered. She was becoming the cleaning woman again, uncertain, apologetic for taking up space. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said softly, her accent more noticeable now. As she turned to leave the stage, she caught a glimpse of the competitors watching from the wings. Their faces showed a range of emotions: shock, confusion, embarrassment, and in some cases a dawning respect. The blonde woman who had mocked her earlier quickly looked away, unable to meet Anna's eyes. Anna walked across the stage, her worn shoes making soft sounds on the polished floor. She kept her head up, though her heart was racing. She had done what she came to do. She had played her music. For a few precious minutes she had been seen, really seen, perhaps for the first time in her life. As she reached the edge of the stage, Mrs. Richardson's voice rang out behind her. "Ms. Lopez," she called, her tone completely different now, respectful, even eager. "Before you go, we have a few questions." Anna turned, surprised. This wasn't part of the standard audition process. Questions were reserved for candidates being seriously considered. The 5 judges were looking at her with expressions she had never seen directed at her before: interest, curiosity, and something that looked almost like admiration. "We'd like to know," said Mrs. Richardson, leaning forward. "Where exactly did you study?" Anna stood frozen at the edge of the stage, her hand gripping the strap of her worn handbag. The question hung in the air between her and the panel of judges. Where exactly did you study? The auditorium had fallen completely silent. In the wings, the other competitors had stopped whispering, leaning forward to catch her response. The blonde woman who had mocked Anna earlier was now watching with wide, disbelieving eyes. The conservatory graduate had pulled out his phone and was quietly typing something, occasionally glancing up at Anna with newfound interest. Anna began, her voice small in the large space. She cleared her throat and started again. "I studied at the Moscow Conservatory for 1 year. A very long time ago." Mrs. Richardson's eyebrows shot up. Professor Winters stopped writing mid-note, his pen hovering above his notepad. The 3rd judge, now fully alert, leaned forward and adjusted his thick glasses. "The Moscow Conservatory?" repeated the young man who had once been a child prodigy. "Under which professor?" Anna's hands twisted the strap of her handbag. "Professor Nikolai Petrov," she said softly. A ripple went through the judges. Professor Winters nearly dropped his pen. "Petrov?" he repeated, his voice tinged with awe and disbelief. "The legendary Petrov who taught some of the finest pianists of the last 30 years? Anna nodded, her eyes lowered. "Yes, that was before everything changed." Mrs. Richardson exchanged glances with her colleagues. "And after that 1 year? Where did you continue your studies?" A shadow passed over Anna's face. "I did not continue. Not formally." The red-framed glasses judge looked confused. "But your technique, your interpretation? Those don't come from a single year of training, no matter how prestigious the teacher." Anna's gaze drifted toward the grand piano she had just played. For a moment she seemed lost in thought, as if the instrument had become a portal to memories long buried. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, steadier, more confident. "My father was a piano tuner in Moscow," she began. "Not famous, not special, just a man who understood how to make pianos sing. From the time I was 3 years old, I would sit beside him as he worked, listening to the way the notes changed as he adjusted the strings." A small smile touched her lips. "He would let me press the keys while he turned the pins. 'Listen,' he would say. 'Listen to how it changes. The same key, the same string, but now it speaks differently.'" The judges were silent, captivated by this unexpected story. Even the competitors in the wings had grown still, straining to hear. "By the time I was 6, I could tell when a note was even slightly out of tune. By 8, I knew which keys on our old upright at home needed adjustment without playing them. My father said I had perfect pitch. though we didn't know the term for it then. Anna's posture had straightened slightly as she spoke, some of the confidence from her performance returning. The light caught the silver threads in her dark hair. When I was 10, a client of my father's, a music teacher, heard me playing a piece I had learned by ear. She offered to teach me for free. 3 years later, I won a small competition in our district, then a larger one in Moscow. By 16, I had earned a scholarship to the conservatory. The blonde competitor from earlier had moved closer to the stage, her earlier mockery forgotten. The girl in the red dress stood beside her, mouth slightly open in wonder. Professor Petrov said I had... Anna paused, searching for the right words in English. He said I had a rare gift, that I could make the piano speak in a way that many trained musicians never learn. She fell silent for a moment, her eyes growing distant. What happened after that year? Prompted Mrs. Richardson gently. Why didn't you continue? Anna's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. My father died suddenly. My mother had left years before. There were my 3 younger siblings to care for. The scholarship covered only tuition, not living expenses. She shrugged slightly. I left the conservatory and found work. First cleaning houses, then offices. Eventually, I worked in a factory that made electronic parts. The young judge shook his head in disbelief. But your talent. Surely there were other options. A small, sad smile crossed Anna's face. In the Russia of those days, for a girl from my background with 3 hungry children to feed? No, there were no other options. Professor Winters was scribbling furiously now, occasionally glancing up at Anna with an expression of fascination. And how did you come to be in this country? He asked. The factory closed in 2012. Many people lost jobs. I had a distant cousin here who said there was work. She gestured vaguely. I came with my youngest sister. The older ones were grown by then. And the piano? Asked the judge with the red-framed glasses. When did you start playing again? Anna's expression softened. I never stopped. Not completely. Even in the hardest times, I would find ways to play. Sometimes at a community center. Once at a church where the caretaker let me practice after services. For many years, I cleaned the classrooms at the community college in exchange for 1 hour each week on their practice pianos. She looked down at her hands. Rough, calloused hands that had scrubbed countless floors, washed innumerable dishes, folded thousands of sheets, and yet somehow maintained the precise dexterity needed for Chopin's most challenging compositions. 7 years ago, I found a small upright piano being thrown away. It was badly damaged. Water stains, broken keys, cracked soundboard. But I remembered what my father had taught me about piano mechanics. I watched videos online about repairs. Slowly I fixed it. It's not perfect, but it makes music. From the wings, more competitors had gathered, drawn by Anna's story. The mocking smirks were gone, replaced by expressions ranging from curiosity to admiration to shame. I practice early in the morning before work, Anna continued. From 4 until 6 while my neighbors are still sleeping. And on my days off, sometimes all day. A hint of color touched her cheeks. The music. It has always been inside me. Even when I couldn't play, I would hear it in my head. Complete pieces from beginning to end. Mrs. Richardson placed her pen down and folded her hands on the table. Ms. Lopez, how is it that someone with your obvious talent and training has never competed before? Surely you must know how exceptional your playing is. Anna looked directly at the head judge for the first time. I know how the world works, Mrs. Richardson. People see what they expect to see. They hear what they expect to hear. She gestured toward her simple dress, her worn shoes. They look at me and see a cleaning woman. Why would they believe I could play Chopin? The auditorium was completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to have paused in its humming. 2 years ago, Anna continued, her voice growing stronger. I was cleaning the practice rooms at Westfield Community College very early in the morning. I thought the building was empty, so I sat down at one of the pianos and played. Really played the way I do when no one is listening. She smiled slightly at the memory. I didn't know that Dr. Chen, a retired music professor, had come in early to gather some old scores. He heard me playing Beethoven's Appassionata from the hallway. When I finished, he was standing in the doorway staring at me like... She gestured toward the judges. Like you are now. Professor Winters leaned forward. Thomas Chen? From the University Conservatory? Anna nodded. Yes. He offered to give me lessons, real lessons, in exchange for helping clean his apartment once a week. For the past 2 years, I have studied with him. He was the one who suggested I enter this competition. Mrs. Richardson exchanged glances with her colleagues, a silent communication passing between them. Then she turned back to Anna. Ms. Lopez, your performance today was... She paused, searching for the right word. Extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. I've judged this competition for 15 years, and I've rarely heard Chopin played with such technical precision and emotional depth. Anna blushed deeply, unused to such praise. If you don't mind, continued Mrs. Richardson, we'd like to hear a second piece. Something contrasting, perhaps. Do you have anything prepared? Anna's eyes widened slightly. This was unexpected. Additional pieces were usually requested only from finalists. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I have prepared Beethoven's Sonata No. 17 in D minor, The Tempest. Professor Winters raised an eyebrow, impressed by the ambitious choice. The entire sonata? Yes, Anna replied simply. The blonde competitor in the wings whispered to her friend, The Tempest is notoriously difficult. This can't be happening. Mrs. Richardson gestured toward the piano. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Lopez. As Anna walked back to the grand piano, she passed several of the competitors who had gathered in the wings. The young man who had graduated from the conservatory nodded to her, a gesture of newfound respect. The girl in the red dress stepped back to give her more space, her earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. The blonde woman couldn't meet Anna's eyes, her face flushed with embarrassment at her earlier mockery. Anna sat down at the piano bench again, adjusting it slightly. The nervousness that had marked her initial entrance was gone now. In its place was a quiet dignity, a sense of belonging. She placed her hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play the stormy opening of Beethoven's Tempest. The first powerful notes filled the auditorium. This time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. From the very first measure, Anna played with complete authority, as if she and the piano were old friends having a conversation that had started decades ago and never truly ended. Mrs. Richardson closed her notepad. There was no need to evaluate anymore. They had just discovered something rare and precious, a true artist who had been hidden in plain sight, playing her heart out to an empty apartment while the world slept, waiting for someone to finally listen. In the back of the auditorium, unnoticed by anyone, an elderly Asian man with silver hair had slipped in and taken a seat. Dr. Thomas Chen watched his unlikely student with a smile of quiet pride. He had known this moment would come, had been waiting for it since that early morning, 2 years ago when he'd heard the cleaning woman playing Beethoven, with more passion than most of his career students had ever managed. Now finally, the world would hear what he had heard. Finally, Anna Lopez would be recognized not for the floors she scrubbed, but for the music she made. And as the tempestuous notes of Beethoven's sonata swirled through the hall, something was changing, not just for Anna, but for everyone listening. Assumptions were being questioned. Prejudices were being examined. And the invisible lines that separated people, lines of class, education, appearance, and opportunity were, for a few magical moments, beginning to blur. The final notes of Beethoven's Tempest resonated through Preston Music Hall, lingering in the air like the afterglow of lightning. Anna's hands hovered above the keys for a moment, before slowly coming to rest in her lap. She sat still, eyes closed, allowing the last vibrations of sound to fade completely before breaking the spell. Behind her, the auditorium had filled with people, not just the judges and competing pianists, but staff members, administrators, even the janitor who had paused his work to listen from the back door. They stood in reverent silence as if in a church after a particularly moving sermon. Mrs. Richardson was the first to move, rising to her feet with tears glistening behind her professional facade. The other judges followed, and then, like a wave, the entire room stood in spontaneous ovation. The sound startled Anna. She turned on the bench, eyes wide with surprise at the crowd that had gathered during her performance. Her cheeks flushed with color as the applause continued, growing louder rather than diminishing. Professor Winters was nodding with undisguised approval. The young judge who had been a child prodigy was beaming, clapping with genuine enthusiasm. In the front row, Dr. Chen's eyes shone with pride as he joined the standing ovation for his unlikely student. Beside him stood the blonde competitor who had mocked Anna earlier, her face a complex mixture of emotions, admiration, embarrassment, and something that might have been envy. Anna stood uncertainly, smoothing her simple dress with trembling hands. She offered a small, shy bow, unpracticed but sincere. "Ms. Lopez," called Mrs. Richardson over the continued applause. "Please wait for us in the green room. We need to confer, but we'd like to speak with you afterward." Anna nodded, gathering her handbag. As she made her way off the stage, people stepped aside to let her pass, some nodding respectfully, others reaching out as if to touch the hem of her garment. It was a complete reversal from her earlier treatment, and Anna seemed unsure how to receive it. Dr. Chen met her at the edge of the stage, his weathered face wrinkled with joy. "I told you," he said simply. "I told you they would hear what I heard." Anna squeezed his hand gratefully. "You are the only one who believed, Dr. Chen." "Not the only one," he corrected gently. "You believe too, somewhere deep inside. Otherwise you would have stopped playing years ago." Together they made their way to the small green room off the main hallway, a modest space with a worn sofa, a coffee table stacked with music magazines, and a small refrigerator humming in the corner. Anna sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture still reflecting years of making herself small, trying not to take up space. Dr. Chen settled beside her, calm and composed. "What happens now?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chen smiled. "Now, my dear, your life changes." Before Anna could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. The young man who had been taking notes at the registration desk peered in, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by eager deference. "Ms. Lopez, the committee would like to see you now. Both of you, actually," he added, nodding to Dr. Chen. They followed him down the corridor to a small conference room where the 5 judges sat around an oval table. Mrs. Richardson gestured for Anna and Dr. Chen to take the 2 empty seats. "Ms. Lopez," she began, her tone warm and professional. "Your performances today were remarkable. Truly remarkable. The committee is in unanimous agreement that you should advance directly to the finals of the competition, bypassing the semi-final round entirely." Anna's hand flew to her mouth. "The finals? But there are so many talented competitors." "Yes," agreed Professor Winters, "and none of them played with your depth, your maturity, or your technical mastery. This isn't just about skill, Ms. Lopez, it's about artistry. What we heard today was, well, it was something special." The judge with the red-framed glasses leaned forward. "We'd like to know more about your current situation. Dr. Chen has filled us in somewhat, but we're curious. Where are you working now?" Anna's hands twisted in her lap. "I clean at Mercy Hospital night shifts and 3 mornings a week at the law offices downtown. Sometimes I pick up extra work on weekends." The judges exchanged glances. "And when do you practice?" asked the 3rd judge, the older gentleman with thick glasses. "Early mornings before work. Sometimes late at night. Whenever I can." Mrs. Richardson looked troubled. "On that upright piano you mentioned? The one you rescued?" Anna nodded. "Yes, it's not in the best condition, but—" "This won't do," interrupted Professor Winters. "Not for someone preparing for the finals of this competition. Not for someone with your gift." The youngest judge cleared his throat. "The university has practice rooms that go unused during evening hours. As a faculty member, I have keys. You would be welcome to use those facilities, Ms. Lopez. And my home has a baby grand," offered the judge with red-framed glasses. "It sits silent most days while I'm teaching. You would be welcome there as well." Anna blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by these offers. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Dr. Chen advised quietly. "It's time, Anna." Mrs. Richardson folded her hands on the table. "There's something else we need to discuss. Dr. Chen has informed us that you've been working under rather challenging circumstances, that despite your extraordinary talent, you've had no formal management, no professional guidance since your time at the Moscow Conservatory." Anna nodded, unsure where this was leading. "The winner of this competition receives not only a cash prize but also representation by Wilson Artists Management, one of the most respected agencies in the classical music world. However," Mrs. Richardson glanced at her colleagues, who nodded in silent agreement. "We've spoken with Mr. Wilson by phone just now. Given the exceptional circumstances, he's agreed to take you on as a client regardless of the competition outcome." Anna's eyes widened. "But why would he do that? He hasn't even heard me play." Professor Winters chuckled. We sent him a recording of your performances today. It took him less than 2 minutes to make his decision. This is too much, Anna whispered, her voice breaking slightly. Dr. Chen placed a steadying hand on her arm. No, my friend. This is exactly right. This is what should have happened 20 years ago. The room fell silent for a moment. Then the third judge spoke up, his voice gentle with age and wisdom. Ms. Lopez, may I ask you something rather personal? Anna nodded hesitantly. All those years, cleaning offices, working in factories, raising your siblings, struggling to survive. Did you ever consider giving up the piano completely? It would have been understandable, you know. Anna's eyes drifted to the window where late afternoon sunlight streamed through half-drawn blinds. Outside, the world continued as it always had. Cars passing, people walking, life flowing in its normal channels. But in here, everything had changed. There was one night, she said softly. During a particularly cold winter in Moscow, I was working 2 jobs and my youngest brother was sick. We couldn't afford heat and medicine both. I had sold almost everything of value, including my father's watch. The only thing left was my mother's necklace, a simple silver chain with a small pearl. Not worth much to anyone else, but precious to me. She touched her neck absently, as if the necklace might still be there. That night, I wrapped the children in every blanket we had and sat at our neighbor's piano. She let me play sometimes when her family was out. I played for hours until my fingers were numb from cold. Mostly Chopin, some Bach, music that reminded me of better times. The judges listened, transfixed. When I finally returned home, my sister, who was only 12 then, asked me why I had been crying. I hadn't realized that I was. Anna smiled faintly at the memory. She said something I've never forgotten. She said, Anna, when you play, you're not just a sister or a worker. You become something else, something beautiful and free. Anna looked up, meeting each judge's eyes in turn. After that night, I knew I could never stop playing, no matter what life demanded of me. The music was not just something I did, it was who I was. Who I am. Mrs. Richardson dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Professor Winters cleared his throat gruffly. Even the youngest judge seemed moved. Well, said the judge with red-framed glasses, breaking the emotional silence, I think that settles it. Ms. Lopez, the finals of the competition will be held 3 weeks from today at Symphony Hall. It's a public performance, broadcast live on the regional classical station. Each finalist plays a complete concerto with the City Symphony Orchestra. Anna paled slightly. A concerto? With orchestra? I've never... Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1, suggested Dr. Chen. You've been working on it with me. But it's not performance-ready, Anna protested. And to play with an orchestra. You'll have 3 weeks of intensive preparation, said Professor Winters. We'll arrange for time off from your jobs. Paid leave, of course. I couldn't possibly... Ms. Lopez, interrupted Mrs. Richardson gently. Sometimes life offers a second chance. A chance to become who you were always meant to be. Will you take it? Anna sat very still, her hands, those strong, capable hands that had cleaned and cooked and cared for others for so many years, resting palm up in her lap. Hands that had never stopped making music, even when no one was listening. Outside the conference room, the hallway had grown busy with activity. The day's remaining competitors were gathering, voices rising and falling in conversation. A few were discussing the mysterious woman who had apparently delivered a performance so extraordinary that the entire competition schedule had been disrupted. The blonde competitor, who had mocked Anna earlier, stood with her friends, her confident facade cracked. I heard she studied with Petrov himself, she was saying. In Moscow years ago. Impossible, replied the conservatory graduate. If she had that kind of training, she wouldn't be cleaning floors. And yet, said the girl in the red dress thoughtfully, she played Chopin better than anyone I've ever heard. Inside the conference room, Anna looked at the 5 judges, at Dr. Chen, at the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the table. 20 years of dreams deferred, of talent hidden, of music played in empty rooms before dawn. 20 years of what might have been suddenly transformed into what might still be. Yes, she said finally, her voice steady and clear. Yes, I will take it. As Anna left the conference room with Dr. Chen, word of her extraordinary performance had already begun to spread throughout the music community. By evening, The story of the cleaning woman with the hands of a virtuoso would reach the local news. By the next morning, videos secretly recorded by awestruck competitors would begin circulating online. And in 3 weeks, Ana Lopez, who had spent decades in the shadows, playing her heart out to empty rooms, would step onto the stage of Symphony Hall, into the spotlight at last. Symphony Hall glowed with golden light, its grand chandeliers casting a warm radiance over the packed audience. Every seat was filled, something unusual for a regional piano competition, even for the finals. But tonight was different. Word had spread throughout the city, then across social media, then to national news outlets. A cleaning woman with the hands of a master had emerged from obscurity, and tonight she would play with the City Symphony Orchestra. Backstage, Ana Lopez stood in a simple black dress, new, but not ostentatious. Dr. Chen had helped her choose it, insisting that her talent deserved proper presentation, while respecting her preference for simplicity. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, with a few silver-streaked strands framing her face. In her hand she clutched a small pearl pendant on a silver chain, her mother's necklace, which she had never sold even in the darkest times. 5 minutes. Ms. Lopez, called the stage manager, a young woman who had been extremely formal with Ana during rehearsals, treating her with a respect that still felt foreign. Ana nodded, trying to steady her breathing. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of change. True to their word, the competition committee had arranged for paid leave from her cleaning jobs. She had spent days practicing on proper grand pianos, at the university, at the judge's home, even at Symphony Hall itself during orchestra rehearsals. Mr. Wilson from the artist management company had flown in specifically to meet her, bringing contracts and speaking of concert tours, recording opportunities, and a future Ana had long ago forced herself to stop dreaming about. He had been especially interested in her story, saying with undisguised excitement, "The musical world loves a remarkable journey, Ms. Lopez, and yours is truly extraordinary." Now, as she waited to step onto the biggest stage of her life, Ana closed her eyes and thought of her father tuning pianos in Moscow, of her siblings huddled under blankets during cold winters, of the countless early mornings and late nights spent playing for no one but herself. She thought of the hospital corridors she had mopped, the office wastebaskets she had emptied, the endless hours of labor that had filled her days while music filled her soul. "Are you ready?" asked Dr. Chen, appearing at her side. Ana opened her eyes and gave a small smile. "I've been ready for 20 years. Out in the auditorium, the buzz of conversation grew louder as people found their seats. The story had captured the public's imagination. Local news vans were parked outside. A documentary filmmaker had already contacted Mr. Wilson about rights to Ana's story. Among the audience members were directors from major orchestras, curious to hear for themselves if the videos circulating online, shaky, surreptitiously recorded clips of her audition, truly represented a major undiscovered talent. In the front row sat Mrs. Richardson and the other judges, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and pride, as if they had discovered a rare gem and were about to show it to the world. A few rows back, Ana's younger sister, flown in by the committee as a surprise, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, overwhelmed by seeing her sister finally receive the recognition she deserved. Scattered throughout the auditorium were other competitors from the audition 3 weeks ago. The blonde woman who had mocked Ana sat stiffly beside her teacher, her program clutched tightly in her hands. The conservatory graduate was there too, his initial skepticism transformed into a kind of reverent curiosity. The girl in the red dress had brought her entire piano class, whispering to them that they were about to witness something special. The house lights dimmed, and the audience fell silent. The conductor, a distinguished man in his 60s who had initially been skeptical about performing with an unknown pianist, but had become one of Ana's most vocal supporters after the first rehearsal, strode onto the stage. The audience applauded as he bowed and turned to the orchestra, raising his baton. The opening chords of Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 thundered through the hall, those iconic, powerful chords that have thrilled audiences for generations. And then, as the orchestra paused for the piano's entrance, Ana Lopez walked onto the stage. The audience applauded politely, many leaning forward in their seats, eager to see this woman they had heard so much about. Ana approached the gleaming concert grand piano with quiet dignity. Gone was the uncertainty that had marked her entrance at the audition. Gone was the apologetic posture of someone used to being overlooked. In its place was a calm confidence, not showy or dramatic, but the natural poise of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. She nodded to the conductor, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. From the first notes, it was clear to everyone in the hall that the stories were true. Anna played with a mastery that seemed to transcend technique. Her hands moved across the keyboard with both power and delicacy, drawing sounds from the piano that made it seem like a living, breathing entity rather than an instrument of wood and wire. But it was more than technical brilliance that held the audience spellbound. It was the story she told through the music, a story of longing and triumph, of beauty found in the midst of hardship, of a spirit that refused to be crushed by circumstance. Every phrase was imbued with meaning, every note shaped by a lifetime of feeling and thinking and remembering. The orchestra responded to her playing, the musicians leaning into their parts with unusual emotional investment. The conductor, who had led this concerto dozens of times with famous soloists, found himself following Anna's lead, discovering new meanings in music he thought he knew by heart. In the front row, Mrs. Richardson closed her eyes, transported by the performance. Beside her, Professor Winters nodded in time with the music, occasionally whispering "magnificent" under his breath. The youngest judge was recording the performance on his phone, his hands trembling slightly with excitement. Anna's sister wept openly now, remembering the cold Moscow apartment, the sacrifices her older sister had made, the music that had been their comfort in the darkest times. A few seats away, the hospital administrator who had supervised Anna's cleaning work for years sat in stunned disbelief, trying to reconcile the extraordinary musician on stage with the quiet woman who had mopped floors and emptied trash cans without complaint. When the first movement ended, the audience erupted in spontaneous applause, breaking the usual protocol of waiting until the end of the entire piece. Anna looked momentarily startled, then gave a small, gracious nod before turning back to the keyboard for the lyrical second movement. Here, in the tender andantino, Anna's playing became even more personal. Each melodic line was shaped with exquisite care, as if she were telling her most intimate secrets through the piano. The orchestra responded with matching sensitivity, creating a dialogue of rare beauty. In the audience, the blonde competitor who had once mocked Anna wiped away tears. The conservatory graduate sat with his head bowed, as if in the presence of something sacred. The girl in the red dress watched Anna's hands, trying to understand how they could communicate so much emotion. By the time the final movement arrived, with its thrilling dance-like rhythms and virtuosic passages, the audience was completely captivated. Anna played with a freedom and joy that was infectious, her body moving naturally with the music, her face illuminated from within. The technical challenges that make this concerto a test for even the most accomplished pianists seemed to disappear under her fingers, not because they were easy but because they served a greater purpose, the expression of something profound and true. In the final moments of the concerto, as piano and orchestra raced toward the triumphant conclusion, Anna seemed transformed by the music, becoming not just its interpreter but its embodiment. Her hands flew across the keyboard with a combination of precision and abandon that left the audience breathless. The final chords resounded through Symphony Hall, piano and orchestra united in a moment of pure musical ecstasy. As the sound died away, there was a beat of absolute silence, that magical moment when an audience is so moved that they cannot immediately react. Then, as one, they rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous, filling the hall with a wave of sound that seemed to lift Anna from her seat. She stood slowly, looking out at the standing ovation with an expression of wonder and gratitude. The conductor extended his hand and she took it, stepping forward to acknowledge the orchestra before turning back to the audience. The applause continued, showing no signs of diminishing. People who had come out of curiosity were now shouting, "Bravo!" Flowers appeared from somewhere and were passed forward to the stage. The conductor stepped back, leaving Anna alone in the spotlight, the focus of an adoration that seemed to surprise her still. In the front row, the judges were on their feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. Dr. Chen stood with them, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered face. Anna's sister was both laughing and crying, her hands pressed to her heart. The ovation continued for nearly 5 minutes, an eternity in concert time. When it finally began to subside, Mrs. Richardson stepped forward to the edge of the stage. The audience quieted, sensing an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "what we have witnessed tonight is extraordinary by any standard. While this evening is part of a competition, the judges have taken the unprecedented step of making our decision before hearing the other finalists." A murmur ran through the audience. Ana Lopez is not only the winner of this competition, but is, in our unanimous opinion, one of the most remarkable pianists we have ever had the privilege to hear. The audience erupted again, the applause even louder than before. Ana stood center stage, her hands clasped in front of her eyes glistening with tears. Mrs. Richardson continued when the noise subsided somewhat. Ms. Lopez's journey from the Moscow Conservatory to this stage is a testament to the enduring power of talent, passion, and perseverance. Her story reminds us to look beyond appearances, beyond circumstances, to the extraordinary potential that may lie hidden in plain sight. Ana was presented with a crystal trophy and an envelope containing the prize money, more than she had earned in the past year of cleaning. But everyone present knew that the real prize was something far more valuable: recognition, opportunity, a chance to share her gift with the world. As the evening came to a close, reporters gathered in the lobby, eager for interviews. Critics huddled in corners, already drafting reviews that would use words like revelation and discovery of the decade. The blonde competitor waited in line to speak with Ana, clutching a program she hoped to have signed, her earlier mockery replaced by genuine admiration. Backstage, Ana found a moment of quiet with Dr. Chen and her sister. "What happens now?" asked her sister, still dazed by the evening's events. Ana looked down at her hands, the hands that had cleaned and cooked and cared for others, the hands that had never stopped making music even when no one was listening. They were the same hands, she realized. The same person. The cleaning woman and the concert pianist were both equally part of who she was. "Now," she said softly, I play. I play for everyone who has ever been overlooked or underestimated. I play for anyone who has kept a dream alive against all odds. And most of all," she smiled, touching the pearl pendant at her neck, "I play because the music has always been inside me, waiting for this moment." Outside Symphony Hall, people were already sharing videos of the performance online. By morning, Ana Lopez would be the most talked-about pianist in the country. Record labels would be calling Mr. Wilson. Concert halls would be checking their schedules for available dates. But in this quiet moment backstage, surrounded by the people who had believed in her, Ana wasn't thinking about fame or success. She was thinking about tomorrow morning, when for the first time in 20 years, she would wake up and her hands would be free to make music, not as a secret pleasure stolen from the edges of the day, but as the very purpose and center of her life. The journey that had begun in a Moscow apartment with a piano-tuning father had taken her through hardship and obscurity to this moment of triumph. But Ana knew that this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Her real story was just starting to unfold, note by beautiful note.